All right, let's start off here with a statement of equity that we just passed in our latest incarnation. And I want to share this particular item. First of all, can people see what I shared, or did I share? I didn't share the screen yet, so hang on. We're now, okay, this is the Multnomah Neighborhood Association equity statement that we developed because as a neighborhood, we wanted equity to relate to what we do as a neighborhood, not be something added on. So I will read it out loud for people who can't see the text. But it says, our vision of diversity, equity, and inclusion are natural parts of what we do to be good neighbors. To honor that vision, we express those qualities in common neighborly terms: openness, fairness, and welcoming. We've added safety to the list because the neighborhood needs to be safe in order for its residents to feel like being open, fair, and welcoming. And safety is especially important to those who've experienced traumatically unsafe treatment from systemic unfair discrimination. We make special efforts to include and support communities that have been specially mistreated, and that's top priority. At the same time, we are good neighbors with communities that have been well treated and call on them to help to build a more open, fair, welcoming, and safe neighborhood for all.
Right on, Will. I appreciate you sharing that, Will. And I'm pleased to be able to say that that was passed unanimously by our membership. Well, and with that as our umbrella, understanding that, I do want to just go straight into the introduction of the Commissioner Dan Ryan, the team with the Safe Rest Village. I'm going to pass it over to Jake, and Jake, you can introduce from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Moses, and Neighborhood Association here. Yeah, my name is Jake Dornblazer. I'm a community engagement coordinator with the Safe Rest Village project, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here. I'm going to start the presentation and then go over the agenda with you all. So I'm looking for nods from my people to make sure that this right thing is shared, because sometimes that does not happen. Okay, so during this meeting, we plan on going over leading with compassion. It's an important part of what we do. The problem at hand, Safe Rest Villages, the Sears Armory parking lot location. So we plan on giving you specific information about that site, responding to some of your questions in open Q&A. So this a little bit about this Moses has already talked about. And then from here, I want to hand it over to the Commissioner. Commissioner, do you want to?
Yes, thank you so much, Jake. And thank you, Moses, for being the leader of the Multnomah Neighborhood Association. I know that's a lot of hours, and thank you for your service. Actually, to all of you who are active in the Neighborhood Association, they're a foundational bedrock of this city. And I'm really grateful that all of you are so active. One thing I love about our city is that there's not a lot of apathy. People really do love it and care about it. And that's why we're all here tonight. So yeah, I think what we should do is just go ahead and jump to the next slide. What is it? Keeping perspective. Yeah, before we get into the dialogue too deeply tonight, I wanted to just level set us a bit. This is our city's in a lot of trouble right now. I think we all know that. And it's important that we remember that as I like to say right now, dig out of this ditch and move forward. And I think it's important for you to know a little bit more about me and what's my motivation. Like, why am I here? Why am I leading something like this? And for me, it's definitely came from a lived experience. I am the youngest of 8, and I have 6 older siblings. My 3rd oldest brother had a life that I'll just say when I was younger, he was either my favorite brother on any given day or moment, and then instantly he was not so much my favorite brother. Later on in life, he was diagnosed with bipolar, and he went in and out of, let's say, therapy, and also in and out of 12-step programs. Sadly, his life, I remember when he stopped seeing therapists, stopped going to 12-step meetings, and it wasn't that long after that where his life really started to unravel. Lost his marriage, his family as he knew it, his job. He moved back to Portland. We all struggled trying to house him, if you will. He eventually ended up out in the streets and was houseless. And that's where he found community. He was found community because he found people that he could hang out with, that he could use drugs with. And it wasn't about 8 years later from that point, he was found in a public restroom with a bottle of vodka, the clothes on his back, and a bus pass, and I think 54 cents. And so that was about 8 years ago. And during that time, I learned a lot about what services we had and what we didn't have. And so when it was in a thought that as I was recruited to run for office, and it was really a motivation to know that we have to do something different. We have to challenge the status quo. Hey. If someone could mute, that would be great. And so we have to look at this differently. We have to have solutions that actually come meet people on the ground. We have to not assume that someone can go from the streets into housing and think that it's going to be a smooth transition. And that's, again, part of the lived experience. And what we found collectively, especially my oldest brother, who had the best position to house Tim now and then or care for him, is that if Tim was with people and was going to 12-step meetings, he's fine. If Tim was isolated and we were gone, he would eventually just find himself outside and looking for that community. And again, back onto that sad slide. So I'm not saying that everybody that's houseless is exactly like my brother Tim. In fact, if you talk to 100 houseless people, you'll get very compelling stories from all of them. I will say that there's a lot of differentiated strategies that we need for different types of people who are currently find themselves houseless. That said, Portland at this time, much of it because we're in the state of Oregon that has anywhere between the 47th and 51st ranking when it comes to behavioral health and mental health. And we should be embarrassed by that. And I hope all of you engaging in the gubernatorial race will really look at that as a platform item. And so it's really important that we start innovating and that we do something about it, take some action. All of this is to say that it's very important when you're doing this job at this time is to always lead with that compassion. If my heart isn't staying this right now, it would be impossible to get up every morning and fight the good fight for my hometown, the city that I love. And I've experienced in the 14 to 15 months I've been in office that there's a lot of fatigue right now. And it's understandable. Trust me, I get it. There's COVID fatigue, there's compassion fatigue for the people who are on our streets. And there's a lot of anger and frustration on why hasn't the county and the city done more? And everyone has a right to have that point of view. And there's so many challenges that are related to the unsheltered in Portland right now. It's not just a local story, it's a national story. And it's something that we just need to get on top of. I just hope that we can continue to take time to learn to understand, that we can listen to one another, and that we can believe people when they share their lived experiences, that those are valid. I also think that most of us can agree right now that the current status quo in our city around houselessness, in our city, in our county, needs to be shook up. The status quo isn't working. And so when I got into office, that was one of my focuses, to make sure that we could do all we could at this moment in time. So while the focus today is on the Safe Rest Village site, the Sears site, I just wanted to acknowledge that at this time, we're in a very difficult position because the voters, the residents of our city are very upset. And the headwinds are quite strong right now. And I just hope that tonight that you can really, I'm really asking you to really give us a shot and give us a shot to be listened to tonight. And you'll have a chance to ask questions. But I hope that as you experience this evening, you have some new thinking in your heart and your brain that will allow you to be who you are, which are very good neighbors and very good partners. Some of you, I recognize your names. I really don't like that I keep meeting people over Zoom. I'm sure you don't like seeing me over Zoom all the time either. I look forward to live in-person experiences again. But whether it was a town hall put on by Representative Reynolds with County Commissioner Myron, I know that I've seen some of you at those type of gatherings. And so I really appreciate that you care about the issue and that you're learning and more about how we can show up to be of service to those who are houseless in our community. Why don't we go to the next slide? So what is the scope of our challenge? And this data is dated. It's from the point in time count in 2019. The irony tonight is that at this moment, we're doing the point in time count. The point in time count is exactly that. It's a point in one evening. Where did you sleep that night? And on Wednesday night, last night, we are interviewing houseless people throughout the city and the county to get a better sense of how many people are houseless today. I think everyone would be surprised if the number from 2019 does not go up. And we're doing that again as we speak. In fact, my volunteer shift is on Saturday morning. But we had 2,037 people identify as unsheltered, living in cars and RVs and tents. And none of this was made for human habitation, nor is a city equipped to have people camping in a city. It's just, that's what they're made for. It's the public right of way. And our goal is to get that back for everyone so we can have that back again someday soon. And so right now, what kind of action can we take? But the fact is, there are a lot of people that are houseless, and it will be interesting to see what that number is. But what's more important for me to explain right now is that the point in time count is it's a compliance-based number. It's for the feds to that you're in compliance to do every year. However, what we really need and what I advocated for in my first week in office, and I'm thrilled to say that we do have a contract now with the Community Solutions Organization. It's a national organization. They do the Built for Zero program. And it's about getting that very important real-time data that is necessary for anyone to know what's going on and where you're going, so you can actually make data-informed decisions and be more strategic about how we're spending the investments that come from the public. And so I am happy to say that we, at the joint office, through my advocacy, we got that contract signed. And in fact, as we go into the conversation about the Safe Rest Villages, they're actually a big part of that innovation on the ground to get those data sets, so we really know who is on our streets all the time and not wait for a point in time count, but actually get a real assessment of who's on our streets, who is houseless, and what are their needs to move forward. Let's go to the next slide. This picture is from your neighborhood. It's taken, well, there's the address, Southwest 26th and Barber. There are campsites just a few blocks from the Sears Armory. I know we've received some communication that said there are no houseless people in your part of town. I know that many of you know that there are. So I just wanted to say that it's not as visible perhaps in some parts of the city. In Southwest, it's perhaps less visible because there's more camping that takes place in the woods and is more out of sight. But we do have people experiencing houselessness right here in Multnomah Village, and we need to step up and help them. And the focus of the villages will be to work with the navigation team, will work with the people in your area and navigate them from what would be called unregulated, unsanctioned camping to the village environment, which will be much better and much better than the status quo. Next slide. So the Safe Rest Village program a restorative village, if you will, is a new initiative for Portland, but it's not a new concept. Outdoor shelters combined with services have been on the rise in our city for some time, and they provide a point of entry for people who are currently living unsheltered. And we really do need to meet the unhoused people where they are to provide that on-ramp for services. The unsanctioned camping that we're seeing right now is there's serious health risk with it. There's environmental health, there's environmental damage, and yes, community safety. So we're looking forward to improving that condition with stable living and support services. And so we can really begin the healing and the stability that's needed for one to have that on-ramp to permanent housing. And yeah, I'm an optimist all the way to home ownership. But it's that point of entry that was really missing again from what we found with my brother Tim, taking him from the streets with someone in late stage untreated mental health and behavioral health and putting them into a studio apartment or a one-bedroom apartment doesn't usually work very well because you're going into isolation. And there's been, unfortunately, many bad situations where they've damaged the newly designed studio and one bedroom. And we really need to have this opportunity to do this on-ramp, to do resilience assessments. And with that, let's go to the next slide. So what I found in this role, again, in my first year in office, is that you're not going to get anything done just by yourself. And so it really does take the willingness and the support of the entire council. I hope you're noticing as a council, we're starting to come together on more issues and more alignment. And this is one of our biggest moments in that regard on something that has divided much of the city for some time. And I'm really happy that all my colleagues voted to support the Safe for Us villages. In fact, it was listening to them. It was a shared experience. It began really in April when we supported the shelter to housing continuum, where we did zoning code changes to allow for the siting of outdoor villages. They did so again when we all came together to fully support the Safe for Us villages. Then we had to leverage the ARPA funds from the feds, and that took place at the end of July. And lastly, I'd just like to acknowledge some of the great elected officials and leaders from your community who have been very supportive in this dialogue throughout. My first 3 months in office were pretty challenging. And I want to say that I was so grateful to have a new friend in Commissioner Amanda Fritz. And I really have learned so much from her. And she has been very supportive of the Safe for Us villages, which I know she shared with all of you as a neighbor. And also my partner over at the county, who's been a very big thought partner, both with getting data into the system finally, and also looking at more alternatives from just the housing only approach. It's definitely a false narrative. You need housing and you need these on-ramp services such as shelters. So let's go to the next slide. We had a really big opportunity this fall. We, both the county and the city, had surpluses that weren't projected. And one of the best experiences I've had since been in office, as you know, it's the joint office. And I really feel like I've been doing all I can to put the word joint into that. So it's a city and county collaboration. If you could think of role clarity, the county is in charge of and oversees all of the homeless services for our region, and the city is in charge of infrastructure. So that's the joint agreement. So we had a chance to really live that out for all of you finally. And that was when we came together and made some agreements on investments so that they were aligned and focused. You see a list of them on the slide. A few in particular I'm very excited about that have a direct connection to the Safe for Us villages was to expand the navigation outreach teams. We needed to improve that so we have a better opportunity to have dialogue with those who are homeless on our streets, so we can do a better assessment of who we can move into the villages. And I think some people know this, but the Ninth Circuit Court made it really clear on the West Coast, which is why the West Coast does look different than much of the country in regards to the fact that you cannot sweep, is the word that's used, remove somebody without offering services. And so this is an attempt to move towards that as well, to offer services to those that are houseless. We also expanded support for groups like Solve, Central City concerns, Clean Slate, Clean Start program, to really improve the impact reduction team's resources so we can really clean up. We all know that the city is quite messy right now. And as a neatnik, it drives me nuts. And I know it drives all of you nuts. And so when COVID first began, there was a decision that we just stopped doing all that. And I've learned a lot about how difficult it is to dig out of that. And so it was really important to up those investments. And they are accelerating the amount of work that they're doing. And so we wanted to make sure that that was in conjunction also with opening the Safe Rest Villages, which will be part of Good Neighbor agreements as well. We expanded shelter beds up to 400 new shelter beds in Congress shelters and motel rooms and sleeping pods. We've also expanded hygiene resources to get to the bottom of this humanitarian crisis. It's quite grim. And also we needed some more support to address worker shortages. There's obviously a workforce issue going on in almost every sector. I will say that one of my excitements about this is to see someone going into the village, picture them, vision them getting better, getting sober, moving into permanent housing, finishing up their education, and instantly beginning to work a few years into their recovery as someone that could be a part of that workforce challenge. People with lived experience that have gotten to the other side and are often the best who can be helpful and impactful in working with the houseless. Let's go to the next slide. Oh yeah, this one, I haven't seen this one in a while. So this one really looks at the complexity of each individual that's, I would say, especially those that are chronically houseless, that are experiencing mental health and behavioral health issues. It's not just about housing. It's the stability of housing is a big part of it, but also you have to look at health, which includes mental health and behavioral health. And then there's a self-sufficiency when it comes to job and having a job in the workforce and connection in the community. One of the worst things for anyone that's suffering is isolation. So they're going to find community no matter what. But you have to assess all three of these. And in fact, when I talk about the data sets that are going to be innovative for the villages, it's really to look at three broad buckets, and we'll learn from each provider on what that really needs to look like. But we want to assess, again, their behavioral health and their mental health, and look at their workforce and their education, and then finally how they're doing as a part of the village. And when you can do that resilience assessment, that'll be much better to assess when they're ready to move into housing. It's kind of a whack-a-mole experience for people that are challenged in their life with late stage untreated mental health. And so it's just so important to get the services to them and to be honest and monitor it and know that it doesn't mean at any given time that they won't come back to a level setting place. And you sometimes can get all three of them moving in the right direction. And that will be the goal with everyone that's at a village. Let's go to the next slide. We really want to make sure that we have some basic standards at all the villages. All of the villages will take on the character of the provider's wisdom and knowledge on how they will work with the village community and with the neighbors. But we wanted to make sure that these look very different than definitely the unsanctioned camps that everyone assumes this is going to be just like, but also even an improvement as we keep moving forward with outdoor shelters. And so with that, we were really clear that we needed to have private space for folks. A lot of people don't want to be they don't want to be just in a shelter from 9 o'clock at night to 7 a.m. or whatever, like a 12-hour period sharing in a big dormitory environment. I mean, that can work for some, but we really wanted to try to provide each person with a little tiny home, if you will. And then having real electricity and clean water and food and fire safety. And so we're going through all the codes to make sure that these are definitely safe. And hygiene is such a big deal. Many people report that it's hard to get out of houselessness because of that. And so having real showers and real running water and is so important. And obviously we'll have garbage pickup and recycling. And I think for me, the very most important is the access to services, which has been lacking from many of our shelters, having more robust case management, mental health, and substance abuse services. And so that's just a thumbnail sketch of what each provider is being asked to provide at the shelter, which will be at the village, which will be the case at Multnomah Village. And we'll hear more about that later. Next slide. Jake, in front of everybody, is this where I introduce the next person? Yeah, sorry about that. So I am so delighted that when Kelly Torres, the chief of staff, told me about some people she was hiring when I was sworn into office on September 10th, 2020. That was the week when we had the big firestorms and we all had to stay inside our house. And I think everyone kind of went crazy that week, if you will. Kelly was busy trying to build a staff, and she introduced me to Charity Montez, who quickly became our senior policy person. And it was really easy to want to convince her to take on this job. And so I'm really thrilled to introduce you to Charity Montez, who is the leader of the Safe Rest Village work. And so her actual title is Houselessness Strategies Manager. Charity Montez, please take the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was a really lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you especially to the Multnomah Neighborhood Association for inviting us to share with you tonight. As Commissioner Ryan just said, I am Charity Montez. I use she and they pronouns. And I'm the Houselessness Strategies Manager implementing Commissioner Ryan's vision for the Safe Rest Villages. Just prior to working with Commissioner Ryan, I worked at Portland Parks and Recreation, and my office was in the Multnomah Arts Center. I'm very familiar with Multnomah Village, and I felt like a part of your community for years. I just wanted to say that up front because I have a special place in my heart for Multnomah Village, and I'm very familiar with the site. So I'm going to share some details with you about the Safe Rest Villages program in general, and then I'll get to the Sears Armory site specifically. Next slide, please. Thank you. To start, I've been in this position with the Safe Rest Village project since the beginning of August 2021. And since that time, we've built out the Safe Rest Villages team, which includes a communications liaison, constituent relations specialist, 2 community engagement coordinators, a construction project manager, and a grants analyst to ensure that our efforts are transparent, accountable to the community, and in line with our federal grant guidelines. The Safe Rest Villages team has been managing a number of things simultaneously. And I think the first one everybody wants to know about is site selection. In July 2021, an inventory of city-owned parcels was shared. Of that initial inventory, approximately 70 sites, we determined that 1 site immediately met our criteria. Since then, Commissioner Ryan and the team have been reviewing additional city-owned properties. We've also been in active conversations with other local jurisdictions and private landholders to identify potential sites. We've reviewed over 100 sites to date, and we've announced 3 that I'll talk about in a moment. And we're currently considering additional sites in all quadrants of the city. So the team started in September, and community engagement communications is a big part of it. So the team's been hard at work building out a website, which is saferestvillages.org, and that website is updated regularly, creating a community engagement plan, building out FAQs. We've answered over 500 questions through the dedicated Safe Rest Villages at portlandoregon.gov inbox, and 3 different staff members regularly manage that inbox. We've answered hundreds more emails through our own individual email inboxes, and we're working to establish relationships with stakeholders around each Safe Rest Village. We've attended multiple meetings with neighbors at each of the sites, and we're looking forward to developing those relationships with stakeholders in Multnomah Village as well. Contracting and site development, we are working to open Safe Rest Villages in early 2022. That's now. We're working with our general contractor. We're scheduling site surveys. We're going through procurement processes to secure architectural services, purchase the shelter structures and the other supplies needed for the villages. We're making layout decisions and working through permitting processes for the existing sites that we've selected, as well as identifying additional sites. And I think we've kind of mentioned it, but the Safe Rest Villages program is funded with federal ARPA dollars. And so it takes time to understand the rules, the regulations, and the reporting requirements for the federal grant. And we've recently finalized the reporting measures for all of the Safe Rest Villages, and that'll lead into, that'll help with that data piece that Commissioner Ryan was talking about earlier. And finally, we took over the management of the infrastructure and capital improvements for the existing C3PO villages as they transitioned from emergency shelter to transitional shelter. We've moved the sites from running on generators to being connected to the grid. We've installed flush toilets and showers. We're working with the shelter operators to make sure that the villagers' needs are being met. In the fall, we wrapped up relocation of one of the villages, and we'll be relocating another one of the C3PO villages this spring. Next slide, please. Great. So before I dig into specifics about the Sears site, I want to share how it fits into the existing shelter system. And this slide shows the progress the city and the county have made in meeting the need of unhoused Portlanders since the emergency declaration in 2015. On the left are all the shelters in 2015 prior to the declaration. And you can see that they're all around the central city with the exception of Dignity Village, which is the red dot in the north. I want to acknowledge that the Sears emergency shelter from 2015, 2016 isn't listed on this map because it was set up after that declaration. And I'll talk about that shelter in a later slide. On the right, you see all of the shelters today. So that includes physical distancing motel shelters, congregate shelters, which is more that dormitory style where everyone is in one place, family shelters, youth shelters, and others. You'll see that they're spread out from the central city, and they're to really do that piece of meeting people where they are. And while we've done, we have more to do to provide services in all areas of Portland, we've made significant strides toward geographic equity in service provision. Next slide, please. Right. So this map shows similar what was on the last slide, but it's very specifically just the current outdoor shelters that are sited on public property or receive some sort of public support. So those are the ones in green. The three dark blue ones that are labeled are the soon-to-be Safe Rest Villages. We've got the Menlo Park Park and Ride at 122nd and Burnside, and that's a partnership with TriMet. 2300 block of Southwest NATO Parkway, that's a partnership with the Portland Bureau of Transportation and the Oregon Department of Transportation, who co-own that property. And then you'll see the Sears Armory site. And you'll notice that the Sears site is currently slated to be the only outdoor shelter serving Southwest Portland outside of the central city. We've been, Commissioner Ryan was clear earlier, there's a need for shelters all over the city, and we are considering additional Safe Rest Village sites in Northwest, Northeast, and Southeast Portland. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide shows the Sears Armory site, which you're all familiar with. This site is owned and operated by the city of Portland, and it's zoned EG2. The whole site, which is outlined in blue, is just over 4 acres. And the Safe Rest Village is proposing to use roughly about a quarter of that, about 1 acre. And you'll see that is highlighted in yellow on this slide. We heard a lot of questions about emergency operations. So the Sears Armory site will continue to be used for emergency preparedness and response. We're working with all of our partners using this site, and the Safe Rest Village will not impact the current uses. I know the site to the front is where PBOT is working on their project. That is still going to happen. And one exception to that would be that the Portland Police Bureau will relocate their training activities. Some of you have asked how this is one of the emergency uses permitted by the city's agreement with the federal government. And we're responding to the housing emergency and the humanitarian crisis, of houselessness is a top priority for the entire city council, as Commissioner Ryan mentioned. Council unanimously supported the Paving the Pathways from Streets to Stability ordinance that sort of created the development of these safe rest villages, which, among other things, specifically said the houselessness crisis faced by the city constitutes an emergency. This question has been raised with our federal partners, and we have not heard that they have any concerns. As for the West Side Emergency Response Center, we have worked with our partners at Portland Bureau of Emergency Management to ensure that the village will not interfere with any current operations or known future operations. You've also asked, many of you have asked about city code and land use. And the Safe Rest Villages team does thorough vetting of each site before we announce one publicly. Our team always considers and discusses the applicable zoning codes and other standards for each potential site with the pertinent bureaus, the development review bureaus. At this time, we are still in the process of determining which improvements will be made on the site. And depending on the proposed improvements, this may include considering the development as a temporary activity under Chapter 33.296 in the zoning code. We're still finalizing the site plan and determining the process for applying for permits for development. We do have temporary construction fencing up, but like I said, we're still in the early stages of design. The specific layout is still being worked out. We anticipate 30 to 40 sleeping units. We do not anticipate using the existing buildings that are, the Armory building and the maintenance building, as those buildings are being used for other things by our partners for emergency management and preparedness. In our zoning code, all outdoor shelters are required to include fencing and visual screening. And I know that's a big concern for folks, but that's for safety of the residents as well as the neighbors. And we've been talking with the direct neighbors and the nearby school about their concerns. Next slide, please. Great. So this slide is a sort of another conceptual, conceptual space that shows the basic priorities for all of our villages to serve those in need. And each village will be different depending on the site, but Commissioner Ryan went over some of these earlier. These are a list of the services that will be available at each location. So Safe Rest Villages are intended to be short-term, low-barrier adult shelters managed by an on-site shelter provider. Partners, pets, and personal belongings will be allowed. And participants will access the shelter by referral only. So the sleeping units will offer privacy, and infrastructure will include a shared kitchen, laundry, shower, kitchenette is really the better word, laundry, shower, restroom facilities, trash services, as well as communal gathering areas. And fencing and screening the shelter visually from the surrounding properties, like I mentioned, is required, but we know that art, plants, and beauty are just as important for the shelter participants as they are for the rest of the neighborhood. And then, perhaps most importantly, there's access to transportation and a sense of safety, but the Safe Rest Villages will offer case management and wraparound services to help address the trauma of living on the streets, provide mental health supports and substance use services, and prepare villagers for the next steps, whether that's entering recovery, reconnecting with family, or accessing permanent supportive housing. And the Safe Rest Village team is focused on the siting and the physical infrastructure of the villages, as well as the community outreach and engagement. And our partners at the Joint Office of Homeless Services are managing the services, which includes contracts with the shelter operators. Next slide, please. Great. So we've also understood and heard that there are questions about the 2015 emergency shelter and how this Safe Rest Village will be different. So we've met with the staff who managed the site in 2015, and we are clear that this is a very different model. The Safe Rest Village will be a safe, secure place for people to get off the streets and get the stability they need before they transition to housing or their next step on their journey. Very specifically, the 2015 shelter served more than 160 people each night. That's bigger than the norm for any county operated shelter today, which averages more like 60 to 90 people. So it's hard to manage. The Safe Rest Village, like I mentioned, we anticipate will have 30 to 40 sleeping units. The 2015 shelter was only open at night. It didn't have specific on-site services, and people were bussed in each evening and then out again each morning. The Safe Rest Village will be staffed and open 24/7, which means people will be able to leave their belongings in their sleeping units, access public transportation, and come and go as needed for jobs, school, church, family obligations, medical appointments, etc. The Safe Rest Village will include case management, mental and behavioral health services. And at the same time, the services at the Safe Rest Village are just for shelter participants. So there's no reason for someone to queue to receive services. The next slide, please. Yeah, great. So before I turn this back to Jake, I wanted to just name and introduce the rest of the folks in the Safe Rest Village team that are here on the call. That's Brian Aptekar, Adair Katembwe, Lottie Porter, Michelle Ladd, and then Jake already spoke earlier. And I'm actually going to hand it back to Jake so that he can walk through your specific questions.
Awesome. Hi, thank you, Cherry. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Jake Dornblaser, he, him pronouns, and I'm a community engagement coordinator. So yeah, we received a list of 12 questions from Moses on the 13th of this month that were a summarization of the 160 questions that you all submitted to him over the last couple of months. So I'm going to do my best to go over those right now, but we will go into Q&A later today, so we'll be able to clarify things if needed. So the first question is quite long, so I'm going to break it down a little bit here. So the first one about community input, so Charity has talked about this a lot already, and I want to talk about the state of urgency here to site locations. We do our best to make sure that a site is viable before we announce it and that the landowners are allowing the use. And then we announce it. And then from there, we engage in the community around it to make sure that your voices are heard. We want this to be part of your community. We want community input on what it looks like. And this is the first step of that. And so we're looking forward to that. So number two, the anticipated impacts to the community. This gets into one of the biggest questions that we're probably asked, and that is people camping around the villages, people queuing around the villages, and things like that. So one of the things that we really want to talk about is that these are 24-hour shelters that only provide services to the people inside the village. So there is not a reason for people to be outside of the village waiting for services. There shouldn't be people wandering around. These are meant to be part of the community. We want to make sure they're safe for the people inside the shelter as well as the people in the community. And so we really want to do what we can to, address unanticipated impacts to the community, and working with our partners at the Mayor's Office, the Joint Office of Homeless Services, the Impact Reduction Team, and our shelter providers and other services in the areas to address those problems or those unintended impacts. Then the next question, what does low barrier mean? So, that's a big question. So in this case, low barrier is talking about that these are intended to serve people, their partners, pets, and they can bring their personal belongings, that these will offer case management and other social service will be provided on site. There will be behavioral health and treatment needs will be met for substance use disorders or other trauma from living on the street. We want to make sure that these are a good stepping stone for people that have been on the street, especially street entrenched, that they can access the resources they need to move on to the next step of their life. So number 4, this has to do, sorry, I know that these are long, everybody, but this has to do with the shelter of 2015. Charity covered this quite extensively, so I'm just going to move on from it. Number 5, what about the notice to the neighborhood before the site selection? So Commissioner Ryan talked about the urgency a little bit. Charity talked about the site selection a little bit, and I talked about a little bit in question 1 as well. So I don't want to go too much into this. I'm sure it's going to be a question that's continued to be asked. I do want to say that, we do our work to make sure that a site is viable before we announce it to the neighborhood. We're trying to get these built. There are people on the streets every single day, at least 2,000 from the last point in time counting. 126 people lost their lives last year living on the streets. There's an emergency, and we got to move quickly to address this problem and help our neighbors that are living on the streets. That we're following the joint office's standard way of sheltering sites, where we make sure that a site is viable and that the landowners are on board before we announce it to the community. And then we want to work with the community to see how these look in their community and address your concerns. Number 6 is about the evidence and the support for the SRVs. So our team and Dan Ryan, we believe that we have to do something, and that's a big commitment. And we've met with service providers around Portland. We've toured outdoor shelters around Portland. We've met with shelter providers up and down the West Coast, outdoor shelter providers up and down the West Coast and around the country, and talked to them about what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so this model is really developed with our partners at the joint office and social service providers to meet the needs of people that are living on our streets. That being said, we do want to say that data is a really important part of this. Commissioner Ryan really believes in data and making sure that we have real-time data so that we can track our goals and make sure that these are working as anticipated. And so, we're going to want to learn and improve these as we go. And yeah, that's important to us. So number 6 and number 7 here. Number 6 has to do with conditional use review. Number 8 has to do with emergency uses. Charity talked pretty extensively about both of these, so I'm going to move past them. Number 9 is staff and coworkers. I really appreciate this question as somebody that used to be a social worker. Yeah, there is a staffing shortage, and we recognize that. Ultimately, it's up to the service provider to hire staff. The county and the city included investments into shelter providers and social service providers in the fall bump, and we're hoping that this isn't an issue. But ultimately, we'll learn as we go and hopefully be able to staff it. So, number 10. Number 10 is how many people will serve. So the first question here is how many people will be served at one time. The village looks to be about 30 to 40 individual units, sleeping units there. Most of the units will probably be filled by an individual, though there can be a partner in some of them. What we found is that most people like to have their own unit. So most likely it will serve 30 to 40 people at one time. As far as how many people will serve over the 3 years, our goal is that people access the services they need to move to the next stage, whether that's permanent housing, supportive housing, moving, reconnecting with family and friends, or entering a treatment program, or whatever their next step may be. But our hope is that people use these, that these are transitional, and that people do, go to their next step. Number 11 is what are going to be the accountability measures in place? So this question is that we've interpreted it a couple different ways. And so I'm going to do my best, but I'm welcome to follow up conversations about it. So as far as, what are the accountability measures in place? Overall, the shelter operator is under contract with the Joint Office of Homeless Services, as most shelters in Portland are, both indoor and outdoor. And they provide, direct reports to them, metrics of what's going on and how things are working. But again, there's a couple different ways to interpret this question. So I'm happy to hear questions a little bit later if you all have interpreted differently. And then the last question, a great question, how can you help? First I want to say I really appreciate people wanting to help and getting involved. We're still really early in this process right now. And so there's not a lot of volunteer opportunities as we move forward. There might be volunteer opportunities with the shelter operator. and you know, and there's other shelters around Portland as well. I know that you all were really supportive of the 2015 shelter, and that people like brought food and helped with certain things around the shelter. And you know, we're looking forward to exploring those opportunities here. One thing I really wanted to talk about right now is you know, some of our stakeholders throughout this process. And I was hoping that I could have a couple of them talk real quick just about the work that we're doing with them and our commitment to work together. So if Tracy from the West Hills Christian School has a second to chat, that would be amazing.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, thank you,
So,
Tracy.
yeah,
I'll
thanks
stop
for the
sharing.
okay. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Tracy Vogt, Dean of Students at West Hills Christian School. I was in the meeting the last time we talked about this. I just want to reiterate that West Hills Christian School, at our school, we are aware of the challenges facing our city to safely house our neighbors who are in need. And we do appreciate the city's efforts to find solutions and provide everyone a safe place and a safe and stable place to live. So the Sears Armory is part of that effort, and we recognize that. As we have shared previously, the SRV is going to be located less than 600 feet from our property and near a gate that we use for 100 students daily to enter and exit our grounds. And so I think it goes without saying that we are invested in ensuring that the Sears Armory Safe Rest Village is successful in the way that it's implemented and in regard to potential impacts to West Hills Christian School and also to our neighbors. So we have raised our specific concerns with Commissioner Ryan and the Safe Rest Village staff, and we're appreciative of Commissioner Ryan and his staff's willingness to meet with us earlier this week to address our concerns through a mutually acceptable good neighbor agreement with the city and with the operator of the Sears Armory SRV. So we believe that this effort and the resulting good neighbor agreement that will come out of that can be a model that can be used elsewhere as Commissioner Ryan and the Joint Office seek to expand their efforts and collaboratively address the challenging houselessness crisis across the city. And so we are looking forward to working alongside them in that effort. Again, our intent is to work with Commissioner Ryan and the SRV operator to implement a working plan that provides opportunities for our students and our parents and our families to engage with support the residents of the Safe Rest Village. It ensures ongoing coordination with the City Joint Office of Homelessness, Homeless Services, and the SRV operator. And that also ensures that the SRV and any actual negative events or circumstances associated with its operation will be expediently resolved and effectively addressed. We believe that our efforts in putting a good neighbor agreement in place with Commissioner Ryan and the operator of the site will benefit you, our neighbors, as well. So we actually look forward to continuing to work with Commissioner Ryan, his SRV, and the operator of the Sears Armory SRV. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And then I also understand that Chris from Neighborhood House is here as well. And I hope I'm not putting somebody on the spot, but I think that they knew I was going to call their name.
Thanks so much, Jake. My name is Chris Caccarini. I'm he, him pronouns. I'm the executive director at Neighborhood House. Our vision at Neighborhood House is to ensure that all of our neighbors, all of them, have the community and support that they need to thrive. We believe that housing is a basic human right, that everybody deserves a safe, warm, dry place to live. And therefore, because of that belief, we support the Safe Rest Village. Shelter services are outside of the scope of what we do at Neighborhood House, but we will make ourselves available to offer supportive services as they are useful and or necessary in partnership with the shelter operator once that operator is named. So we plan on showing up in support.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, I have a couple more questions that I'm going to share here. Hopefully I'm sharing the right screen again. I'm looking for head nods. Awesome, thank you. We got a couple, these are a couple of the questions. The next two slides are a couple of the questions that were sent out of the 160. We received these earlier or last week. And we just wanted to talk about them. So one of the questions is, will there be a garden like the one on our website? So we would love to see art, garden, any other ways to make these more feeling like a community and making people there comfortable. Of course, this is going to look different at every single one of the Safe Rest villages. So this is a conversation that really will come a little bit later down the road. And then the next question here is, will the trainings that are currently occurring at the Safe Rest Village, at the Sears Armory, continue to be happening? So Charity covered this a little bit. I did want to say that the trainings that they're doing with the NET volunteers, which is the neighborhood emergency teams, that emergency management or Portland Bureau of Emergency Management puts on, those will continue to be able to happen at the Sears Armory location. The only thing that's moving, all other things will continue happening there that are currently happening there, with the exception of the training that the police are using the building for. And they're working on finding another location. And then the last three questions I have here are have to do with the construction on site. So we have been working with our partners in PBOT and the construction team there just to make sure that we're in communication with each other and that we're addressing any concerns that come up. This particular question asked about noise and dust and vehicle exhaust. We don't anticipate this to be much of an issue because they show up there in the morning, get their stuff ready, and then leave and then come back later in the day. If it is an issue though, we'll talk with them. It's been a really good relationship so far, and we want to just make sure that everybody's safe. As far as like traffic from the construction vehicles and stuff like that, we plan on working with them just to make sure that's safe. And we don't anticipate a lot of traffic increase from the Safe Rest Village. Most people will probably be taking public transportation to and from the Safe Rest Village. And then from here, I wanted to hand this off to Helping Hands, Alan Evans, who we're currently having conversations with about being potentially being the shelter operator for this location. And Alan, if you want to take it from here, the floor is all yours, and you can tell them about what you do.
Thank you, Jake, and thank you, Moses, and the Multnomah Neighborhood Association. I want to say at the beginning of the meeting, the adopting of the equity statement was something that was special, and I really enjoyed that, and everybody else here. My name is Alan Evans. I'm the founder and executive director of Helping Hands Reentry Outreach Centers. We're an organization that runs 11 facilities in 5 Oregon counties. In the next couple months, we'll be housing nearly 650 people a night in multiple locations. And we've opened up the Bivy Lakes Hope Center in Portland. And we just finished adding 200 more beds there for a total of 318 beds, a medical wing, a dental office. We're working on the treatment aspect, nursery services, also vocational training opportunities, a 5,000 square foot kitchen, and we concentrate specifically on homeless reentry. And the reason we do that is because I lived on the streets for 27 years. As a matter of fact, I lived under the Burnside Bridge for 4.5 months, where I had the second coldest night I've ever experienced in my life. And one of the reasons I lived on the street most of my life is because most people looked at me differently than the reality of what I lived through. I was sexually abused as a child. I was hung by my father when I was 11 years old. I was an angry kid. I started running away. I went from location to location, and just like everywhere, I couldn't walk in a door and get navigated to the services that I needed to change my life. So I stayed in that place. I went all over the United States. I've been in nearly every soup kitchen from Victorville, California to Pensacola, Florida, New York, Chicago, Michigan, and I ended up in the Northwest here in Portland just over 20 years ago. I had an opportunity to change my life because the only way that I could get the services that I needed was to get arrested. I could commit the crimes I needed to commit, continue the addiction that I was going through that was actually helping me manage my mental illness. And that's exactly what I did. My story made headline news. And right after I got clean, I saved up a little bit of money, went back to the arresting officers and said, I want to start an organization. And in Seaside, Oregon, we opened up one small location with 9 men in it. And in 6 months, we were housing 67 men, women, and children. Reentry is what we concentrate on. The opportunity for a person to come in, hear their whole story, and then tailor a reentry opportunity for each individual person. One of the reasons why, when we came into the Multnomah County area, we looked at this beautiful building and said, how come a building like this is sitting here and there's such a problem out here? When we're driving around, we see hundreds of people that come from the same exact place I come from. I'm passionate about providing those services. Helping Hands has provided services for emergency shelter, low barrier emergency shelter for 12 and a half years was all we ran for quite some time. We learned a lot in all of that. One is gathering everybody's story when they come in and offering accountable opportunities for people to change their lives is something that our mission is driven off of. When we came to the Multnomah County area, and we've been open for almost 15 months now at Bybee Lakes Hope Center, we realized that the problem is continually getting worse. One of the things we bring to the table, and one of the reasons we offer an opportunity for us to get involved with the Safe Rest Village is because we believe our outreach into the community needs to be important. Navigation for people needs to be important. People need to be able to walk in a door and receive the resources that they need to change their life. And it's the one thing that I was lacking for the 25 plus years, 27 years that I lived on the streets. Our goal in this is to come to an agreement with the county and the city to be able to provide the services, take the 20 years experience and the 27 years of experience of homelessness, bring it to the table. Evaluate every person who comes in through the door, offer triage for people who need more resources than we're able to provide there, and bring the partnerships in the community together to help us navigate how to help people in crisis situation reach the next level in an opportunity to change their life for the better and become sustainable in our communities. The problem is not going to go away unless we provide help. And one thing that Helping Hands brings to the table is that experience. We look at this problem from the bottom up, not the top down. And we've learned valuable importance of the importance of data. We run a system called Tactical Demographics, which is our own proprietary database where all information goes into, and we can tailor and help reentry plans and triage opportunities and organizations in the community come together to serve people. In the 20 years we've been doing this, we've always worked well with neighbors. Public safety is extremely important, just as important as serving the people that need our help the most. We've built our reputation off of that, which has become a very good reputation in the state of Oregon. We're the largest data-driven, trauma-informed homeless reentry program in the nation. And we're grateful for that. We want to be on this team. We want to be a part of it. We're negotiating right now through contracts of what exactly that's going to look like. But I can tell you that if we get this opportunity to run this village, that it will be safe. Somebody asked about volunteer opportunities. We are a volunteer-driven organization. How will we staff this? The wonderful thing about doing our job is that just like myself, when I changed my life, passion to be in this line of work was something that was extremely important. And we have people, that's how we supply our workforce internally. 80% of the people we serve, 80% of the people we employ have lived experience. And 100% of the people who work with the clients who come through our doors have lived experience. We have a process, we have a method, we want to be a team player, and we think we can bring some credibility to this place. And so we're looking forward to figuring out ways to negotiate this contract and get down to the point where we can be a servant outside of Ivy Lakes Hope Center in this community. And we will gladly, whenever you want, field some questions.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Alan,
Jake.
so much. And I think from here, I want to hand it back to Moses for the next portion of our meeting.
Fantastic. Thank you all who spoke. Tracy from West Hills, Loudy and pardon me, Charity, and also Alan and Chris. Forgive me, Chris, for never have been able to have not met you yet, even though your office is 2 blocks away. I apologize for that, and I'll rectify that. Alan, that was thank you for your perspective, sir. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to go ahead and begin the moderated question and answer time. And the way that we have to do this to keep it organized, because we have right now over 160 people on this event. So for me to be able to do this in a organized way, I would ask that you, if you have a question, that you type it in to the chat. And then let me and Will look at, start calling on people after it's been submitted. And then we'll unmute you individually. You can ask your question if you want to do it on the call. And we can get some answers. We can go with that flow. Okay, so once again, if you do have a question that you would like to ask, please announce, type it into the chat window and we'll receive it and go from there. I do want to take a quick moment to give our commissioner an opportunity to say a few words before that, though. So please go ahead.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Moses. I want to say that I hope that you now have more information about what a Safe Rest Village actually is. I also hope that you can see why I'm very proud of the people that have been hired to take on this very difficult and necessary work, in Charity and Jake, and they are completely equipped to answer the questions. And I also want to acknowledge how wonderful it is to see you here, Alan. Thank you. I will keep working to make sure that you're part of the system, and I will stay on to watch the rest of this and then try to do a close at the end. I do have a family commitment around 8 o'clock, so thank you. And it might go off screen when I need to eat because I'm like really hungry right now. Thanks. It's
Very
great to
good.
be with all of you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate that. And already I do have my very first question here. And this is a question for Alan. So if you wouldn't mind unmuting Alan, let me pull the name, unmute the questioner very quickly. All right, here we are. Okay, this is Karen Holdall. Pardon me, Karen.
Honda.
Pardon me.
No worries.
Please go ahead and read your question over there, and Alan we can answer it.
Okay, this is for Alan. If your organization gets this contract, will the program look like the one you already operate at Ivy Lakes? So sober only, frequent drug and alcohol checks, job applications until employed, mandatory community service, etc.
The answer to that is no. We run 2 elements of our program. Our reentry program, our long-term reentry program, is a high barrier program that requires all of those things when we work with people to move them into that. We also have a low barrier entry into our facilities, which gives us an opportunity. This gives us an opportunity to look a little bit deeper into offering more extended time for navigation in the community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Karen. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. I do have another question that has been submitted via email. Let me, wait a second here. I need to pull this up and make sure I'm doing this properly. Is there, Will, is there another question that is in the queue at all by chance while I'm pulling this from my email
Yes.
thread?
I'm getting another set of people's questions here. The first person who asked a question was Edie Van Ness.
There we
So
go.
if you unmute Edie, or Edie, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. I've been trying to get an answer to this question for a very long time, and that's to the commissioner. I've read the ordinance. It's clear that you intend to hopefully move people from high impact camps into these villages, and high impact camps are defined as the most problematic camps. What then is the city going to do to prevent others from setting up in those exact camps, or for having people who are unwilling to go to the villages return within a day or two? Are you going to have security there? Are you going to have preventative measures? What's the point of any of this if 3 days later we're going to have the same problem? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start this answering. I know the village team could answer this question as well. I will say that the reason we improved the amount of resources for the navigation team is to assess who we move into the village, not the camp. And we will definitely make sure that we meet them where they are. They will be doing assessments, they'll be doing interviews and outreach. And when the provider is established, which I'm pretty confident will be Helping Hands, we will make sure that that's actually coordinated with the provider, because they are the ones that are going to be managing the village. So in terms of the safety around, having 24-hour supervision is a big deal. That's why we wanted to have the prospective provider here this evening. We also have additional resources for the impact reduction team to keep the area clean. But I like to say frequently, and I know Alan can add on to this, the reason why we want to make sure the area around the village is clean and free is because of unsanctioned camping, if you will, is because it's not just good for all of you, and that does matter, but it's necessary for the people that are choosing to build their resilience in the village.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt because I don't think you heard my question.
I
not talking
wish
about
you would
the
just let me
village.
finish this and then you can ask.
I'm talking about when you move people from the high impact camps, what are you going to do to prevent the same problem? That's what I'm asking.
So we are moving people from unsanctioned camping into a village with services. That's what we're doing. So that's the simple equation. We're not bringing a van to a big, as you call it, the high, what'd you call it? High impact camping, and putting them in a van and then dropping them off at the village. I think that's what it feels like when I hear that question. And so the reality is that it's a much more methodical and trauma-informed process where the navigation team, in conjunction with the provider.
Commissioner, the ordinance uses the term high impact camp.
Edie, I apologize. We will not have these outbursts. It's amazingly inappropriate and it defeats the entire purpose. So thank you. And if I have another outburst, I will drop you off of the call. So please go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, the language that was used is just described that the current status quo is not okay, and that we need to do everything we can to build relationships with those that are not receiving services, that are out on our streets, and then in a trauma-informed manner, bring them into the village and work with the provider to build their resilience. That's the plan. And Alan, would you like to add on to that? Will, please.
Yeah, I would, if it's okay for that answer. I think the only way we're going to at least put a dent in the bigger problem is to provide help. There's lack of it, and there's lack of access to it. We have to put a dent in it somehow. And I believe that expansion in bed space opportunities in a community balances out a portion of that. Now, I think then it gives us the ability to look at the bigger picture and see what we can do next to solve this problem. So it's going to be here, and we're aware of that. But I think that we're on the right track.
Thanks, Alan. And what I wanted to say earlier was that, again, the reason why we want to have the services surrounding the village to keep the area clean is because when someone's in early stages of leaning into sobriety one day at a time, the last thing they need to do is come out of the village and be triggered by somebody that's shooting up. And so that's one of the big reasons why it's important to also have these safety zones around the villages. It's not just for all of you, which matters, but please know it's also for the village, the people that live in the villages, because we want to give them a shot at moving forward and building their resilience and moving on, just like Alan has in his life.
Yeah, can I add a little bit to that as well? To talk about, I think something that's really important to realize is that what we're doing here is we're doing a new type of service, and there's been similar models around Portland. But one of the things that's really important when we're trying to identify shelters that people can go to is that there's options for people. And right now there just isn't a lot of options. Like Alan said, we need to increase our shelter bed capacity, and we need different options that people feel comfortable going to. And so when we start to look at people camping around Portland, some of the current shelter systems don't work for them. And that's kind of why we talk about how these are low barriers, so that people can come with their partners and with their pets and with their personal belongings, because there are so many shelters out there that don't have the capacity to handle that. And so we're just building capacity of a shelter system to provide more options for people that are currently sleeping outside in these high impact encampments. And so that's really what we're doing, is we're trying to create another opportunity to meet people where they're at and provide these resources and help create a world where there are stepping stones for Portland's most vulnerable neighbors in getting off the street and having, a permanent place to call home. So I hope that helped. I hope that all three of us together kind of rounded out that question a little.
Wonderful. Let's move to the next question here. This is a question that is coming from Patrick and Carolyn Brunette. Patrick and Carolyn, let me open it up here for you, or unmute. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, we're here.
Hello. Wonderful.
Hi.
Please go ahead and read your question. It's a good one.
Yeah, so I'd like the people to talk more about accountability, both in and around the village. It seems that, with rights come responsibility, and this seems to be a part of the equation that's very infrequently discussed with regard to the homeless population. And unfortunately, homeless camps are often associated with trash, graffiti, all the way to property crimes and even, person-to-person crimes. So who's going to be enforcing rules, and what are the consequences for bad behavior in and around the villages?
Good question. Jake, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think I can start this one. And so, Patrick, this is something that we hear a lot about. And the first thing I want to talk about is the difference between people being unsheltered and living on our streets, and then people getting shelter. And I, as well with Alan, can talk about my personal experience with this, right? I lived on the streets here in Portland when I was younger, and I can say without a doubt is that when you have somewhere safe to go, where you can get warm, your mental health changes so much. And so when we think about so many of these issues that people have, or that we're having with people that might be living unsheltered in Portland, that is a part of the result of the trauma of living unsheltered in Portland. And so when we start to meet them where they're at and provide these resources to people, they start to get their needs met, and then we start seeing less impacts from the trauma of being on the street. And so, you know, I want to start off by saying that. And then, you know, I think that one of the things that the shelter operator will do is they'll set expectations with people on what's expected in the shelter. And it's important that, you know, we set boundaries with people and that we hold them accountable. It's part of trauma-informed care, is that people understand that an action has a reaction, and an action has there's a reaction to an action. And so people need to know that when they come to these shelters. They need to know the expectations given to them at these shelters. And then it's up to the shelter operator, and then, you know, with support from the joint office and the county to really enforce those. So Alan, I'm sure you have something to say about this. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Accountability is important. It is. It's what changed my life. Accountability changed my life. It is embedded in how we run our facilities everywhere, and there's different stages of it. Opportunities. We help people. We want them to want to help themselves, and we work together. There are behavioral things that happen that can't happen. It has to be safe for everybody in the village and everybody outside the village, and all of the neighbors. It's extremely important that those rules are put in place for particular reasons so safety can happen both inside and outside. And if we become the provider here, we will gladly share in our good neighbor policy what it is, how we run our facilities, and how we run our emergency shelters and our low barrier shelters. And we'll gladly share that with you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alan, for that. And good question. I want to go next to Brooke Lloyd. Brooke, go ahead and unmute yourself, and you can pose that question. Your question.
Yeah, you'll have to remind me, Moses, exactly how I phrased this, but how?
It was good. Yeah.
Go ahead and read it, Moses, if you got it there in front of you.
Absolutely. When will a decision be made as to whether or not the Sears Armory will be used as a safe rest village, and how? Will there be a vote? More opportunities to discuss this. Did that convey it correctly, Brooke?
Yeah. So,
Yep.
Sorry, Brooke, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that was the question. Yeah. How I keep hearing you say that if this decision is passed, you know, I guess I'm wondering, what's the process look like? Will there be multiple meetings leading up to this decision that's going to be made? Do the residents in Multnomah Village get a say? Like, is it coming to a vote? What's that look like?
Hear you. So this is a question we get asked a lot as well, and I'll go back to a little bit of the language we use in the presentation, and that's where we talk about, you know, we ensure a site is viable and that we can use it by the landowner. And then after that, we make the determination that we're going to move forward putting a village or putting a shelter on that site. And this is common practice with the joint office, and common practice with a lot of how shelters are determined. From this point, we're primarily looking at engaging with the community and the shelter operator, and how this looks in the community, and how this shelter can be a part of your community, and not as much in whether it will be a shelter or not.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say, though, is that really our opinion may or may not factor in. I mean, you'll take it under consideration, but it's not going to impede you in any way or deter you from proceeding with this location, right? I mean, if you guys decide that it works for you, it works for you, and it happens whether we agree with that or not. I mean, because I'm fully in support of opportunities that are available to us to help this demographic that is clearly hurting. And I do believe that it's getting out of control. I would not say that it's an emergency or a disaster. I work in the field of emergency management. This is such a stretch going down that avenue that I mean, that's hours of debating I could have with you on that. My question is, do we actually get a say? Because if literally every resident in the city or in the village, in Multnomah Village, said we are adamantly opposed to this, that doesn't prohibit you from going through with it, correct?
We are following standard procedures that happens with all sheltering inside of Portland. And no, the community, we're engaging the community on what it looks like in the community, not whether we can use the site.
And Brooke, thank you very much for your question. Blunt as it was, it's a good question.
In Brooke, I'm sure you and I could have a conversation about this a lot of times. You know, I've worked in emergency management as well. I actually, yeah, I have a big background in that. I will say that this last weather event that we had, where the temperatures were pretty cool, we set up a significant amount of resources to make sure that we could get as many people as we could off the street so that they don't die in the cold. And so that is definitely an emergency. And if we can increase our shelter capacity and help move people from being on the street into more permanent housing, this will become less and less of an emergency and less of a burden on our system. And so I will say that
so I think that if you implement strategies that actually help to get into the stage of recovery in emergency management instead of this response phase, that would actually occur. But I'm not hearing any strategies about how you're going to, keep this up and start this at a much greater volume than what you're starting with, because I'm not seeing an end goal other than we're just moving people from point A to point B. I mean, it's basically like having a fire hose and you're putting a Band-Aid over where there's a leak. I mean, that's not going to hold up over time.
Yeah, I hear you. And I want to give time for people to answer other questions. I will say that one of the points is that we're offering scaffolding and supportive services. And, Alan can talk more about this and how Helping Hands does their services to ensure that these aren't just places that people are going and then going right back on the street. Like, we really want these to be successful. We really want to provide the resources to help people move on to the next steps, whether that's supportive, permanent, reconnecting with family, treatment, whatever. Like, we want to make sure that we're helping people move from the street into a positive next step in their life. And I know that Helping Hands does that a lot with people. That's something that they're really great at, is providing the resources for people and the treatment for people to help get the resources they need to get employment and get permanent housing or move on to other supportive services. So yeah, but I
thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that we acknowledge the request for conditional use, and the city attorney is making that decision. I also want to remind everybody that what we hear consistently as a city commissioner is for us to do something, stop the enabling, offer real services with accountability that move people from the streets into resilience and having a better life. And so we're finally putting something in front of all of the city that offers real accountability, that isn't enabling the problem any longer. And we are excited that we're partnering with organizations like Helping Hands to be responsive to this crisis and not continue to be in denial about how severe this is.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to ask Cornwallis Corinne. I know that you had a question. I haven't been able to see it, but I know that you're also on the board, so you're not gonna.
Thanks, Moses. And thank you, Commissioner Ryan, and your team for showing up for our community tonight. I will summarize a little bit of quickly my frustration. I think is not hearing from your team until now. I think had we known a little bit more, the summary of what this was going to look like before it dropped into our neighborhood, I think it may have helped my personal framing of the situation. But I had a couple of questions that I just wanted to ask. One of them is, Dan, you mentioned this about 12-step being an important part of your brother's potential recovery and his process, from the street to a home. And I want to know if Helping Hands offers that, or if that will be part of the structure of the success of people getting from a Safe Rest Village into a better long-term housing situation. I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts and plans on that.
So our organization bases, 12-step recovery is a huge part of it because we offer those services in-house at every one of our locations. As we move forward with this location, there's possibilities for 12-step recovery to happen there. We have to be able to kind of work our way through the contracts and the understandings of how the county wants us to provide services to even see if we're a fit, right? But absolutely, 12-step recovery, education, all of those things are extremely important for moving people and offering them. So there will be schedules at this shelter that'll show where meetings are around the community and giving people that best thing. So our organization, our reentry organization is based on that. So our high barrier program, there is no drug use, there is no alcohol use, there's supportive measures, there's treatment, there's all of those things. And we're going to be able to offer that to everybody who walks through the door and gets referred to this facility. But on the ground, when they're in that place that I've been before, that little transition where you roll into opportunity, making sure somebody has something in their hand that says, maybe this is where I need to be today. And they have access to that, yes. And then also seeing if there's possibilities to offer 12-step groups right on that property as an offer. So we'll definitely, as part of the core of our mission, and we definitely want to fight for being able to offer those opportunities there.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Maybe you and I can connect offline on this, but I think that would be a crucial element of success, is to have something on site, on schedule, on a regular basis. The other question that I'm hoping I can hear from Dan on this is what I haven't heard yet from the city, from the commissioners, is what is the plan to mitigate people hitting from the streets on the other side of the Safe Rest Village plan? How do we stop people hitting the streets in the first place? If there's, I know it's a big question, but is there something that's being talked about within the city on how to prevent this from happening and to take us down this road to the Safe Rest Village, how to stop people from getting to the streets in the first place?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and begin that journey with you. It's obviously a long conversation, and I appreciate the question. The reason I wasn't shy about reminding everybody in the great state of Oregon, I'm a fourth-generation Oregonian, this makes me quite sad. We have one of the worst safety nets in the nation. When you look at behavioral health and mental health, we're anywhere from 47th to 51st in all rankings. And so that's why I mentioned that this needs to be a top platform issue for anyone running for governor. And we are in the city that manifests, that is the epicenter for all of this, but it's actually a statewide problem, or Alan wouldn't have been opening these type of services in Clatsop County to begin with. So it's very important that we look at this bigger picture and systemically, but it's also an opportunity for the Safe Rest Villages to be part of that innovation that's desperately needed, to show what it's like when you bring services to the ground, to measure with data on what's effective and of course what's not working. And so this is all a part of beginning that opportunity for our city and our state to move towards being more responsive for mental health and behavioral health in general. Houselessness is very complicated. You could talk to 100 people and you'd get 100 different compelling stories. And so one reason we need on the ground data is to better understand what type of steps are needed. One of the most insecure audiences or groups, if you will, demographics that are on the verge of being houseless are many elders on fixed income. Now with that group, you could definitely look at shared housing as a wonderful opportunity. And so then there's people who are in their 50s that just can't afford to live in Portland any longer because it's so expensive. And their essential work jobs that they have aren't adequate to pay rent. So we need them into the 30% AMI housing that we've been building through the Metro and the Portland Housing Bond. So one reason we need that on the ground data is so we have a better strategy on what audiences would need to go into what next steps. In terms of the bigger question about what's causing this, there's so many factors. It's a very long answer. It's also, as one reason I was involved in the pre-K all the way to college work, is because it does start in that journey with children getting the tools they need to be equipped and be educated, so they have access to a good life. So thanks for that question, and just know that this is Portland's opportunity to come together and to have some shared opportunity, but also some shared sacrifice as we heal and move forward as a city.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the response.
You're so welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Corinne. I'd like to put on the queue now, Mark Rizzi. Mark, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. Hey, thanks everybody. I appreciate the stories of the impact. I'll be honest. I feel better about this initiative, although I'm still very concerned, having heard from Alan and others, about the potential effectiveness. Here's my questions, though. Two, did I hear that other camps in the area would be cleaned up in response to the SRV village, as to not be a trigger for the residents that are choosing to try and recover? Because there's been, as we all know, a lot of issues with camps under the Bertha Bridge and on Barber and so forth. And then the second question is, what about how are we going to manage the unmitigated consequences? Crime has just gone out the roof. Casa Colima has been broken into. The gas station has been broken into. The coffee shop's been broken into. Right here in Multnomah Village, they've been broken into Fat City Cafe twice. My daughters found meth pipes and syringes at the dog park. How is that going to be dealt with?
I can start with the when we talking about I'm going to go back to people be not in services, living unsheltered on our streets, have a lot different world, and there's a lot of unanticipated issues that happen when there's the trauma of living on the streets. And so that's what we see a lot of, and that's what we get in our brain, like a brain when we picture people. And I really want us to focus on compassion a little bit here. And like when people get their services met, and when people are, in treatment, when they have a warm place to sleep, when they have food in their belly, like a lot of those issues that we're seeing are dealt with already, right? They're not trying to go and figure out how to get a warm space. They're not trying to go and figure out, how to get some food in their belly, because those needs are already being met. And so I really, I hear you so much, Mark, I really do. And I really want to stress, from working in the industry and also from my lived experience that I can talk about the differences there.
Well, I mean, real quick, like I said, I feel better about this type of system being proactive in the sense that it's trying to give people some of the basic needs that they require, so they're not so desperate to do things that lead to trouble. Again, to the question though, is the plan to clean up some of these other sites on Barber so that the people that are trying to get recovery in this place will not be triggered, or will the sprawl of problems continue in the area in addition to the SRV? That's the first question. And then what about the crime? I mean, I guess the crime would potentially go down with the type of folks that are trying to recover and get these basic needs met. But is there any thoughts on that?
I'd like to jump in. Thank you for the question. So in some of our earlier slides, we talked about the fall bump and the surplus money and the investments that we made there that council and the county made. So some of those were very specifically to address what you're talking about, right? So we have navigation teams, which are the outreach workers. Those are the folks that are engaging with people who are in camps, finding out what they need, connecting with them, getting building relationships, getting trust, and referring them to services. So the investment that council and the county made there adds 25 additional outreach workers. So that with the intention that those outreach workers will be able to proactively go and engage with folks around existing shelters, including the Safe Rest Villages and the outdoor shelters. So that's one piece of it. The other piece, Commissioner talked about a little bit with trash and garbage. Similarly, council and the county made an increased investment in our impact reduction programs budget. And that includes, those are the folks that clean the camps and remove the biohazards and everything that are really like the bad parts of what we're experiencing there. So we've increased the budget for them. And then also we're looking at having very specific, contracts with folks with lived experience to be actually cleaning around the areas of the Safe Rest Villages and the existing shelters. And then, from some of our other experiences with the C3PO villages and other outdoor shelters that, the city helped bring on the St. John's Village, Kent Women's Village, there's not, with the exception of one of the outdoor shelters, there's not the same kind of like camping right around the outdoor shelter that people think is happening. And some of our, once the village went in, it was being vandalized. We saw it on slides earlier, there was vandalizing happening, things are getting tagged, it's sort of not being maintained. And then the village goes in, there's a mural painted, there's a different sense of belonging and ownership. It's not getting vandalized anymore. So there's some of that is gonna, we've made those investments and that's gonna be addressed. The larger crime issue, I'm actually just gonna see if Commissioner Ryan wanted to touch that at all.
Before you jump in about crime, sir, I do also want to talk about, what I'm hearing is that like, are people from your neighborhood going to be in the village? And, that's something that we hear a lot about too. And I want to talk about how when we, people are referred to places, they most likely want to stay in the neighborhood that they already have relationships with. So you should see a good impact. That's why it's important that we have equity around the city, right? And that we don't have a concentration in services, is so people in every neighborhood have a place to go and continue to have their resources in that neighborhood. And so Mark, I know that doesn't specifically address everything you wish it would, but I do want to say like, there is data that does show that people want to stay around their services and access shelters around where they're currently camping. And sir, Commissioner Ryan, if you want to talk about safety, feel free.
Yeah, your question weaved in, we have 3 priorities that we've got to stay focused on as a city right now and as leaders. And that is houselessness, community safety, and economic recovery. It's going to be really hard for us to get economic recovery, especially when you bring up the stories that you did, that I get messages about it every day, where small businesses are attacked and damage is done. And as a city, we have to be responsive to that as well. So the first 2, houselessness and community safety, are fundamental in terms of us getting out of this ditch as a city. And, we didn't get here overnight. And sadly, we're not going to get out of it overnight, but you're starting to at least see the right investments. You're seeing an alignment between the city and the county finally. I mean, 6 weeks into being in office, I was forced to make a decision on, do we further defund the police? And I said no, and have suffered 9 times people came to my house to do damage. So, serving this city at this time is a real act of love, and that's why I'm here. And I also want you to know that our office this week, in fact, called a special meeting with two elected officials from the Salem. They're in a House, one in the Senate, the DA, the head of the community safety for the city of Portland, Mike Myers, and the chair of county government and the head of behavioral health. We have to get to the bottom of the fact that we're dealing with new meth, new heroin, that is incredibly complicated. The undercurrents of this are very complex. And as a city and as a state, sadly, over the last decade, we've made decisions that have closed sobering stations, closed Damage Hospital. And so what you're seeing on the streets is a city and a state that has made, that wants to have this perfect compassionate conclusion, but in the meantime, we've shut down services and we haven't offered anything. So now when you're in office, like I am right now, you're doing everything you can to start moving the needle, to have the courage to start building some services so that we can actually move people towards building some resilience. So it's really messed up right now. I hear you. I'm frustrated about it. Everyone is. People are angry, and that's where the fatigue is coming in. And so all I can tell you is that we are on it like never before. The investments are aligned. We've stopped the bleeding in terms of defunding the police, and we're restoring. No more revenge politics. It's time to do restoration type of solutions. So I will sincerely keep doing my best every day to make these tough decisions. There's headwinds all over the place. Everyone, they'll do a survey even on Safe Rest Villages, and it's really popular until it's close to your neighborhood. That's just how it is. Internally, there's challenges to build these that you don't really need to know about, but it's just, there's a lot of headwinds when you're trying to take action to get to the bottom of providing radical services to move people to a better place and to make the city safer. So it's time for all of us again to buckle up and love the city enough to have some shared sacrifice and some shared opportunity so that we can keep moving forward together.
Thank you for your response, and thanks for voting to keep the wheels on the police. We need them. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. I'll continue to be that person.
One thing I do need, Dan, thank you. I want to share a question real quick before we end, and also say that those that have not had an opportunity to have their question answered, you need to stick it in the chat window so it's a part of the permanent record, so I can make sure that we can get it forwarded to the city so that they can answer it for you. One question that has come up, we're happy that a good neighbor agreement is with the West Hills School will have a good neighbor agreement with the city. Will the city enter into one with the neighborhood association? There is a precedent for it as far as like with the Pearl District Neighborhood Association and such. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're going to have one good neighbor agreement, and it will include the key stakeholders, which is the city, the shelter operator, the West Hills Christian School, the Multnomah Neighborhood Association. So what we've done, the community engagement team can talk about this, but what we're doing at our other Safe Rest villages is, we've had, and we have here too, we've had individual conversations with different groups. We're coming to a big presentation to get sort of all of the questions out. And then going forward, we plan to have regular stakeholder meetings that usually includes representatives from the neighborhood association, representatives from the local schools, and that so that it's a smaller core group that can move that work forward. And when the shelter operator has a contract in place, we will bring them into those conversations as well.
Very good. Also, I just wanted to have one other thing. Well, shoot, we're running so low on time here. I did commit to one last question with someone. It's if I may just very quickly pull it up here. Oh, here we go. Can someone, Jake, this might be most appropriate for you, or Alan, this might be appropriate for you. Can someone be evicted? If so, under what circumstances?
Well, yes, and it's not an eviction. It is a shelter. If a person is violent, if they're a risk to the safety of the facility, of the people there or outside of the facility, absolutely. People get an opportunity, but people have to behave. It's important. So there's a few things that will do that. We're getting those in detail now, so we get our rules of how we run the facility, and to make sure that in our agreement as we move forward to become an organization that runs this facility, we get all of those in place, and that's what we're looking at now and negotiating through.
Thank you. Any other, Jake, we're down to the last 5 minutes, and Alan, I want to thank you for your time tonight. I'm sure we'll be talking again. What should we do here? Over the next 5 minutes, I just want to at least say this, make sure that this is on the table for everybody, that all the questions that have been answered, that have been asked this evening, that are in the chat, will be shared with the city, and I'll get you answers. We'll get answers for you. I'm really appreciative of the time that people have taken out of their evening to be here for the last 2 hours to learn more about the project and to get some facts and to be able to form opinions from that. We have our next meeting of the Neighborhood Association in February, on February 8th. And at that time, I'll be on the agenda is a good 30 minutes plus to discuss what we've learned here tonight and to take steps as a neighborhood association to go forward from this knowledge. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'll definitely be in touch with everybody and get back to everyone. Is there any other comment, Jake?
Yeah, I would
SRV
love,
team?
yeah, thank you so much, Moses. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate, this was well ran and it's been wonderful. So thank you so much for having us here. I do want to say, you're welcome to send us questions, saferestvillages@portlandoregon.gov. And then I encourage everybody to go on our website and look at things. There's a lot of information on there. We really try to put information on there. And Brian has worked his heart out to get as much information on there as possible. And so I really encourage everybody to go to our website, saferestvillages.org, and look at it. Specifically, what villages will and won't be is a great resource to learn about a lot of stuff. And then, continue asking questions, and we'll hopefully answer them soon in the future. And then the one thing I'd like to just talk about for next steps, and you all, I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to say about it after your next meeting. We'd really love to identify stakeholders who we could regularly meet with. And what the West Hills Christian School is right in there, and we'd love to identify other stakeholders as well. So I look forward. Thank you again, Moses, for having us, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Well, absolutely, and we look forward to discussing this with you as one of those interested stakeholders. So we'll be in touch. Absolutely, folks. It is 2 minutes from the top of the hour. I'm sure I'll be hearing from many of you about this evening's discussion. We'll certainly talk in person, or I should say, we'll talk more about this at the general meeting on the 8th. So I do want to thank you very much for being here. Charity, did you want to? I'm responding to a quick note here. Did you want to make a closing statement?
I just actually wanted to ask Commissioner Ryan if he would like to make a closing statement. And I also want to offer my thanks for having us tonight, Moses, and for moderating this. But Commissioner Ryan, did you want to take us out?
Yeah, well, I actually, Moses, I've never met you before, and I regret that. You really are an amazing leader for the Neighborhood Association. Your ability to be objective and keep this meeting running smoothly was something we can all learn from. It's a really great leadership skill. I always say it's about letting the room be smart and engaged, and you did that. You let everybody show up and be themselves. I admired that. And Will Fuller, it was great to know that you were behind the scenes running everything. I know of Will because he's been quite active in about everything in the city, including the schools. So when I was on the school board, I had an opportunity to get to know him. And thinking of that too, I was on the school board when they, wanted to close one of your schools in the area, Reiki Elementary, and I knew it was a ridiculous idea. And so you know, it was fun to be there and get to know at least some of the Southwest community at that time. And as a, you know, 4th generation Oregonian, as a person who's from this city, I love every neighborhood, but I've always been quite fond of the Multnomah Village neighborhood. I mean, who isn't? It's quite lovely. At this time, I want to also just say how great it was to be in a meeting with you, Alan. We've been getting to know each other over the last year, and we're getting into some good trouble together now, which I just love. And I'm just so delighted that you showed up this evening. And Chris, it's always good to see you, who I know from the nonprofit community. And I want to acknowledge the team. The reason why I feel confident about this moving forward with the dignity and elegance and grace and results that you all deserve is because Charity Montez, Jake, and the rest of the team that you're getting to know tonight are so capable about building these and working with amazing providers that will bring on site, such as Helping Hands. And I want you to know that I'm very comfortable with them answering any question at any time. And I just wanted to let you know that when you're getting answers from them and you're working and engaging with them, you're getting the best service from the city of Portland and definitely from my office. So I'm just so grateful to the team. I feel like a very proud person at this moment because of that. Every question you had, all the frustration that I could hear in some of the voices, and I understand, I hear you. There's not a day that I don't get up that I'm not inundated with such challenges right now. People in this town are hurting. Housed people are hurting. It's impacting all of you. The houseless crisis is everyone's concern. And I will always listen and include small businesses, housed neighborhoods in every part of the city in this challenge. And I think for too often, you have been left out of the equation, and we've been in some echo chambers in government on this issue, and that can no longer be the case. And so thank you for having hopefully a little bit more faith and a little bit more hope that what you heard tonight, it gives you just a bit of a difference in your mindset about what you were thinking prior to coming this evening. I want you to know we did all we could to get to this moment. One of the things we've learned, and I'll close with this, is that it's like chicken and egg. It's hard to engage when we don't even know if it's a viable spot from the attorneys. And trust me, there's a lot of attorneys in the city of Portland. And so we are here with you at this time because we have hope that this could be successfully implemented. And I just thank you for leaning in just a little bit more tonight and giving this a shot. I know that you're all good people. I know that you all care about your sisters and brothers. And I'm really grateful to be getting to know all of you a little bit better. And I know there'll be many conversations on many issues facing our city right now. And I have a lot more hope because I got to know more people in the Multnomah Village this evening. And I appreciate all of you so much. Thanks for being here.
Commissioner, thank you very much for that. And I look forward to having a cup of coffee with you at Village Coffee down in the middle of Multnomah Village here soon.
I'm all in.
Very good. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank you very much for being here, and we will continue this discussion. Thank you, folks. Have a wonderful evening.